Food truck or food trailer? Which one's best for you? In this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of both food trucks and food trailers so you can figure out which one's best for your situation. So let's dive in. All right, Bill, let's dive right in. Food truck or food trailer, which is best? Easy answer. Food trailer, right?
100%.
Yeah, piece of cake. No, obviously I'm going to be biased, but in this topic, I try to be as unbiased as possible because I'm wired similarly to you. If I'm not a good fit for somebody as a food trailer dealer, that's fine. I don't want to force my product down someone's throat, okay? So probably the best way for us to do this is list some of the pros and cons so that somebody watching this can decide for themselves what's going to be their best situation. So let's start here. Let's start with the food truck pros, okay? The first one I have is it's just one unit. That's easier to manage for somebody. If they're, moving around a lot, going from place to place or parking in tight spaces, things like that, a food truck is going to be an easier thing for them to maneuver, park. It's a quicker setup time. What other areas or reasons would you want to have a food truck over a food trailer?
Basically, when somebody asks me that question, I answer just like you did. But I tell them, think about where you're going to be using it. What's the environment going to be? So as a food truck, if you're going to be in a metropolitan area, you want the truck. You don't want to be messing around towing a trailer,
right,
through downtown, any city.
Right.
So just think about where you're going to use it mostly. And then that dictates which one you go with. Food truck, like you mentioned, where would it go? Certainly downtown parking. Much easier to park a single unit.
Yep.
If you're going to be even in a small parking lot that we see in a lot of downtown areas, it's always very tight. It's way easier to get a truck in there than it is to get a trailer in.
Right. Even if you have, I know some people will even if they don't have those scenarios, they're driving and parking a lot of spaces. And so if you're not comfortable backing up a trailer or something like that, a food truck is going to be the easy way to go there. But on the flip side, there's some cons to that as well. And we'll start with the biggest one. It is one unit. So if you have a mechanical problem with the truck, that can leave you in a really tough spot. If it breaks down or you have an engine problem, then all of a sudden, are you going to get your truck towed from event to event, or are you going to get it fixed? But it's a commercial vehicle, so getting it fixed is a lot more expensive than getting your Toyota Camry repaired. What are some of the other cons that you see with food truck operations that might make it more of a challenge?
Space, essentially, because you have the engine compartment and the passenger compartment still counts the full length of the vehicle, no matter what size truck it is.
Right.
So you have less space to cook in. What you got to consider is if you're going to a lot of events, as a food truck, you're paying by the foot, the linear foot. So you've got the engine you're paying for, which is not generating any revenue.
Right.
You got the passenger compartment not generating any revenue. So you have a 10-foot, 12-foot, 14-foot kitchen box, but you had to pay for that 20, 25, 30-foot spot to get it all to fit in.
Right.
So again, it depends on where you plan on vending the most frequently. That's what you need to buy.
Right, exactly. Another thing to consider is that it's a higher startup cost for a food truck versus a food trailer. So if you have a limited budget, a food trailer is going to be the simpler way for you to get started. Even if you want to work up to a food truck, that might be a goal that you can achieve later down the road, but a trailer might be a better way for you to start. In the meantime, what are some other considerations?
Well, if you have a trailer, for instance, that means there's a tow vehicle. The tow vehicle has space for storage.
Right.
Okay, so if you're going to set up tables and chairs, for instance, they can go in the bed of the pickup truck.
Right.
A lot of food vendors that have a trailer will actually put the generator in the back of the truck, where it's got a lot of room to breathe, but nobody can walk up and touch it with it being hot, because they get super hot. So there are things that, as a benefit to having that separate tow vehicle. The neat thing is you pull into an event and man, you're swarmed over. You're feeling great about it, but you're looking at the clock going, uh-oh, it's 2 o'clock and I got to be here at midnight. you can disconnect the tow vehicle and send it off to the store to pick up more food.
Right.
Can't do that with a food truck.
Right, exactly. Once you're there with the food truck, you're there, you're set up, and it can be really costly if you run out and you have to go back. We have friends of ours that we were talking to at the last food truck expo, and they were telling us when they first got their truck, they were so excited about it, but they were so new at operating, they would forget stuff at their house. So they'd have to get in the food truck and drive it back to their house, pick up stuff, and then go back. I think they said their first event that they did, they had to leave 2 or 3 times because they kept forgetting stuff. Shoot, we don't have this, and they'd have to close everything back down and go, versus a separate vehicle that they could have run back and get things. Or if they have to make an emergency trip to the store, that's a huge deal to have a separate vehicle to be able to go do that. Can be the difference between if you have to completely stop your service or not. And that can be a massive loss if you have to completely shut down because you're out of something and you can't go restock. Some of this we've already touched on, but what are some of the pros of operating out of a trailer, and what are some of the scenarios that it would be better for somebody to have a trailer instead of a food truck?
Well, again, where are you going to be vending primarily? If you're going to be doing a lot of events, you can have that smaller space and only pay for the space you're cooking out of rather than having to rent space for that engine compartment.
Right.
Think about if you're going to be in a less populated area. It's easier to pull into, a Walmart parking lot or Lowe's parking lot with a trailer and set up. You could even disconnect if you needed to, and you still be able to sell food while somebody runs and gets other supplies. The reason that the reason I like food trailers better, we have one. And it's an 18-foot trailer, and we have 18-foot with a cooking space on the inside.
Right.
We utilize every bit of it. Whereas if we had a food truck, we wouldn't have 18 feet of cook space unless we bought a really, really big truck.
Right.
And then it becomes of where can we drive it to? Because now we got limitations on weight. It's much easier to have your own tow vehicle. Most people have a pickup truck that are looking to be an entrepreneur. They've done something that it gives them either an SUV or a pickup truck. If you're going, and you can certainly use an SUV, if it's the right one, and it's got a good tow package,
exactly,
and upgraded.
Yeah, and we've seen too, even if you have a mechanical issue with your tow vehicle, it's so much easier to sub that out, and you can even rent a pickup truck and pull it where you need to pull it if you need to in emergency. So that aspect of it becomes way less of a liability. If you're able to swap out the tow vehicle in case you have problems with yours, you can do that. We know some customers of ours have been excited about getting a trailer because it gives them an excuse to also upgrade their pickup truck, and that's really fun for them. And so we know that there are some husbands and wives who have had that conversation where the husband is very excited to upgrade his truck, and so that can be a fun advantage if that's something that you're looking to do. Another scenario that I think of, and I think you guys have this for the most part too, is if you're going to be parked at a permanent location, it really doesn't make sense to have a food truck because you've got a whole commercial engine and driving compartment, all that just sitting there not being used that you've paid for. Whereas a food trailer, the whole thing is just a commercial kitchen. And so I think if you're going to have a permanent or a semi-permanent location, a food trailer is probably going to be a better scenario for you. And like you said, the whole thing is your commercial kitchen. So what I like about that too is it gives you more flexibility in your design and your setup of how it's arranged. And so even as we've talked about the importance of speed of service and all those things, that can play into it as well. You get a little bit more flexibility there with your kitchen and the food trailer. Hopefully I'm not coming across as too biased here as a food trailer dealer.
You mentioned our food truck. We don't move. We haven't moved the thing in 2 years. We've parked it and it's there. We're hooked up to power, we're hooked up to water, we're hooked up to sewer. So it's perfect fit for us. I can't imagine having bought a food truck and then parked it, because even if it just sits, you still have to maintain the engine. You got a battery, you got to go out there and make sure you crank it over. You're going to still have to do the oil changes. Those types of engines will leak oil. So now you got to worry about where's the oil going you've been sitting there for 2 years. Is the gasoline getting bad? So you don't want to spend that kind of money and then not utilize the thing.
Right.
It's an asset that you spent money on and not used in a business.
Right. Well, and that leads to the next pro for the trailer is just your maintenance cost overall is so much lower on a trailer. Because from a mechanical perspective, you've got axles and wheels.
Yep.
And then it's not really mechanical, but it's got an electrical system and it's got a plumbing system. But other than that, I mean, it's a glorified box on wheels. Yes. So there is so much less. And again, the truck is a commercial vehicle. So the wheels and tires on the food truck are a lot more expensive. Anything that you have to maintain is going to be more expensive versus the trailer is so low in maintenance. And as long as you can do basic things throughout the ownership of it, it's way less than getting the oil changed and doing all those things you have to worry about on a full truck. And so that's another pro. But to be fair, there are cons to owning a food trailer as well, and we've touched on some of them, but I think the first one is some people just aren't comfortable driving a truck and a trailer. And if you're having to park it a lot, backing it up can be very tricky, and so that is a big thing for some people, that they do not want to hook on, have to hook and unhook and all that. What are some other cons that you see with owning a food trailer?
I mean, it's really hard for me to say because I own one. I think just the biggest one is how do you drive it? Like you talked about when Melissa first started driving ours, it was slow going, and still she won't hardly back ours up at all. She'll want me to do it or someone else to do it.
Right.
Because she doesn't have the confidence. So you have to take the time to build up that confidence. Whereas you're driving a truck that's, an integrated unit, even though it's much longer than your car, you're probably gonna be able to drive it fairly easily.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just where your skill level is.
Yeah, exactly. I know one of the other things that we've seen, and just something I've even heard from people, is that the food truck tends to be a faster setup and tear down than the food trailer. And so if you get to an event, if you're in a rush or something, the food truck might be a little bit easier than the food trailer because of that. And even hooking and unhooking is a part of your setup and tear down. Whereas a food truck, you pull up, you park, obviously you gotta prep some stuff in your kitchen, but open the window and you're ready to go. And so a food trailer might be a little bit more involved, especially if you're gonna go to an event and detach, then you gotta detach, gotta go park your vehicle somewhere, then walk back to your trailer, open it up, and then same thing, tear down at the end, go get your vehicle, come attach to it. I know sometimes if it's a crowded event, sometimes people will even pull in and park it, detach their vehicle, then someone else comes and parks in front of your trailer. So then you got to wait for that person to move out at the end of the event before you can come attach to yours. So there is that level of inconvenience there that you can run into with a food trailer versus a food truck. So you do have some added simplicity for the food truck that you might not get with the food trailer.
One thing that I would add that a lot of people don't consider, and this comes from us getting on a whole bunch of food trucks and food trailers. A food truck is more stable when it parks. You can literally, because it's on four wheels, so it doesn't have a lot of movement that a trailer will. You have to have the stabilizer jacks, which take time to whatever system it is to move up and move down.
Right.
Ours are spring loaded, which doesn't always work because if there's a big depth, it only goes so far.
Right.
I can't keep screwing the thing like you can with a scissor jack. So there is more just set up to make it stable. And, that could be a con or not. I like setting it up to be stable. So when I walk on the thing, it feels firm and we're ready to go.
Right.
In a food truck, you're like that almost automatically.
Right.
It's still got some movement because the shocks and all that, but it's not as bad as a trailer can be.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. I hate walking into a trailer and you feel it wobble. I don't like that feeling. So I'm with you. In most of ours, we've got a stabilizer jack on each corner, and so that can help. The one advantage that you have on the trailer side is that if where you're parked is not level front to back, you can level a trailer, which is nice that you can't do that on a truck. And so but I'm with you. The truck is definitely a more stable thing right off the bat than the trailer is. And so I think that that's a good distinction there. And then the other part of it that I would say too, that maybe it's a small thing, maybe it's not, but especially if you're kind of design something from scratch and have it built, one of the things that you have flexibility on a trailer is you get to determine your interior height. That can be a really big deal because there's some pieces of equipment that don't fit into a normal interior height. And there's a lot of box trucks that are used for food trucks that you cannot build it taller than what it is if you're taking an existing box truck and converting it. And so having that flexibility of picking your length and height for your build can be a huge advantage as well, depending on what your equipment setup is that's going into it. Or guys like you're tall, you don't want a 6'6" interior height because stuff in the roof that's in there you're gonna hit your head on it.
Yeah.
And so there can be some just things to think through on all of those things, from design to operation to driving it to where you're parking it and how you're using it. And so I think we've covered a lot of those things here, hopefully enough to help people make a decision on what's best for them. Again, as you and I clearly know, the food trailer is typically the best way to go. No, obviously we're joking, but this is a big decision though. And so hopefully this helps people watching determine if they should get a food truck or food trailer and feel really confident and comfortable with their decision moving forward because it's such a big deal. So thank you, Bill, for helping talk through this subject. I know this is going to be beneficial for a lot of people.
I certainly hope so. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So what's this topic?
I got caught looking straight at the camera like this.
Oh,
Bill, do you have? Okay. All right. If Bill's up for it, I'll do it.